Okay, back in the geometry nodes workspace, let's turn back on the main scene. I'm going to disable assets, just collapse that, and then click on the object to get our geometry nodes tree back. Okay, now things are going to get a little bit more fun. So let's go back and find where we were working on the big buildings and small buildings in the geometry nodes tree. And remember where we had provided the instance on points node with this cube node. Okay, I'm going to take this cube then and hit X to get rid of it. And in its place, let's do Shift A and search for collection info. We'll drop that right in there where the cube used to be. And then click in the field and find buildings big. Okay, we're going to select buildings big. And remember, that was the collection that contained these three buildings, 1, 2, and 3. So it's going to look inside this collection and find the collections that we want to instantiate and then throw those in as instances. But just make sure to check separate children, reset children, and pick instance. So now we're going to have all different instances of these buildings thrown on top of those points. Now, if we take a look around, this is fine, but what we want to do is really make these things look different. We want to make each building look kind of individual, even though we only have 3 of them. And we're going to do that by using this space in between here and rotating them at different angles and sizing them at different heights and widths and stuff like that. So let's start that process here. I'm going to add in a vector math node, and that does a lot of things, but we're interested in the scale function down here. And let's plug that right into the scale input of the instance on points node. Now you notice they all go away because the vector is 0, 0, 0. This is x, y, z. So let's bring that back to 1 on each of those things. And remember that trick, I can click and drag down on each of these fields and then type in a value and they all change. So that now they're back to 1. But this multiplier, the scale multiplier, is what we'll eventually be interested in. Let's reset that to 1 for now. But I don't just want to scale the buildings each uniformly. I want them to have a little bit of a different footprint and different heights and things like that. So I'm going to just tuck this collection info out of the way a little bit. And to do that, we need to get access to each of these x, y, and z values. And to do that, we need to pull out this vector socket and then search for a combine x, y, z. And again, that defaults to 0, so we're going to have to reset that to 1. And now I can control each of these parameters individually, and that's really what we want to get to in order to make these buildings really look like there's a variety of different sizes. And this is the perfect time to use the random value node. I'm just going to move this down here and make ourselves a little bit more room and add in a random value node. So search for random value. I'm just going to drop that right in here. And instead of a float value, we want to generate a vector value, because that's going to give us 3 values for the price of 1. And I can set min and max values for each of those XYZ values. So for the min, I'm just going to say, let's just start with 0.3. We might need to change this, but let's just start with 0.3. Now this is going to generate a vector. Well, here I've split them out here individually, and that's going to make sense in a second. What I need to do is first separate this random value into its components and then plug these right back into the combine. So they're just going to follow along here, right, left to right. Okay, so as it stands, what we're doing is we're generating values between 0 and 0.3 for each of these XYZ values before we send it on through to a final scale, and then it gets assigned to each instance. That's fine, but what's happening here is each of these values is going to be evenly distributed between 0, 0.3, and 1. What I want to do is have the height of the buildings be kind of a bunch of them varying in height, but kind of lower, and then a few that are kind of pretty high like that. So most of them I want to look like that, and then a few that are going to be taller. So to do that, I need to reshape that random distribution. So this is why we split these out and then recombine them later, because it gives us access to each of these values separately. And I really just want to change the Z. And I can do that with a really cool node called the float curve. I'm going to drop that just on the Z in there. So this might help if I add some more buildings back into our point distribution. Let's take a look here. So you can kind of see that all of these buildings are random, but the randomness is quite uniform. The distribution of that randomness is pretty regular. And I want to disrupt that with this float curve. So this float curve is saying, take all these values coming in, and currently those values are 0.3 to 1, so somewhere in that range, and it's going to remap those values according to this distribution. Well, right now it's 1 to 1, a perfect diagonal curve. It's not going to actually change anything. What I can do is add a control point in here and change these values a little bit, and I can change that control point to a vector. So it's a little bit more easier to control. And now you can see if I make it really extreme, you can kind of see that what was once a distribution like this is now kind of remapped like this. So I'm taking all these values that were untouched and I'm kind of suppressing them down and reducing their value. You can kind of start to see that a little bit here. So there's a lot of buildings that are short and just a couple that pop up like this, and can maybe even make this more extreme like that to make this point. I don't want it that extreme, but I do want it to be something like that. Okay, so this is getting us set up to where we want to go. But I think they're all just generally a little bit too small. So I'm going to go increase this global scale a little bit here. Okay, and I think I might want to start their height a little bit higher. So it's something like this, maybe 0.5. Okay, and maybe a little bit more of a distribution. Maybe I'm going to reduce the distance between each by a little bit. We're going to really start to tweak with these numbers as we go forth, but just kind of want to generally get something that looks pretty decent. This looks all right to me. Maybe they're a little skinny. I think I want to start their X and Y footprint a little bit more too. So I'll make that 0.5. This looks pretty good, but I want to do one extra step. And that step is going to be rotation of each instance. See how each building type, so take these two kind of diagonal buildings, for example. Each time they're instantiated on a point, they don't change rotation. They're always rotated at the same angle. So here's 3 more, right? So here's 3 more here. And they're all facing the same direction. Same with all these other buildings. You might not notice that. I do notice it, and I just want to take a quick opportunity to change that. So what we're going to do is rotate them. I'm going to move this a little bit out of the way. I'm going to rotate these instances 90 degrees on their z-axis, but I'm only going to rotate them by multiples of 90 degrees. I don't want weird kind of angles. I want to maintain this nice kind of grid formation that we have. So what I can do is add in a new node called rotate instances. And I'm going to tuck that in right here after we instance those points. So here's a rotation right here, and I want to access just the Z rotation. I only want to affect this rotation right there. Well, to access that, let me reset that to 0. To access that, I need to pull out this socket and then search for combine XYZ. So there we go. And now I can access just the Z rotation. So I want to provide this Z value some multiple of 90 degrees. Well, one little thing about Blender here is that when we combine XYZ and give it into rotation, these are now radians. So I need to make sure that I'm dealing in radians and not degrees. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add a value, and I'm going to set that to 2 times pi, which is like 1 full revolution. Actually, you know what? I'm going to set that to just 90 degrees, which would be pi over 2, I believe. Man, my trig is a little bit rusty. But I want to multiply this by some multiple of 0, 1, 2, or 3. I want to multiply this by one of these numbers to make sure that I'm in 90-degree increments, and I want to feed that value to Z. So what I'm going to do is generate another random value. And this one is going to be an integer, and I want the minimum value to be 0 and the max to be 3. And I'm going to multiply pi using a math node. going to multiply these two values together. I'm going to set that to multiply, and I'm going to multiply the random value by pi over 2, send that result into Z, and now I should be getting random rotations of 90 degrees on all these buildings, and it looks like that's what I have. So I'm pretty happy with that. Okay, getting a little bit more complicated now, but hang with me. So all of this right here deals with distributing points on the faces, instantiating the buildings that we modeled just earlier on those points, sizing them randomly, and then rotating them, and then sending that result out to a join geometry, which outputs finally to the group output, which is what we're seeing in the viewport. That's basically where we're at right now. And the little buildings still are these small placeholder cubes, which are down here in small buildings. So we're gonna repeat a little bit of what we did here down in this group, and I'll go a little bit faster this time. So I'm gonna add in a collection info. I'm gonna feed that into the instance, get rid of our placeholder cube. And here we want to select buildings small. I'm going to select separate children, reset children, and pick instance. So now you can see them all on there. They're quite big, so we need to resize those a little bit. And we can resize those randomly. And I think we might want to, let's just try to, let's first try a standard distribution of randomness. So let's do a control, or shift A rather, random value. We'll pick a vector, and we'll pick something like 0.1 to maybe 0.5. We'll see where that gets us. And we're going to just send that value directly into scale. All right, it's a little bit small, yeah. I think I might want to increase this to maybe 0.2. It's not bad. But once again, let's rotate these randomly about 90 degrees. So I'm going to search for a rotate instances node, drop that in here. And rather than do all that work again, I'm just going to copy these 4 nodes here with Control C, move down into this group, paste those in there like so. Send the results into rotation. Okay, and that worked fine for us. So let's see what we got here. This is looking all right, I think. I'm not sure about... We can always change. I mean, the beauty of procedural modeling is we're never locked in. We can always come back and update this and change things how we want. But I think I'm generally happy with where we're at so far. Let's just make a couple tweaks. I think up here in our big buildings, I think I want the height to be even greater. So I'm going to take our max height, which is the 3rd value in this random value generator. I'm going to just edge that up a little bit more. Let's make that maybe 1.1. Okay, that's maybe a bit tall, but we can always come back. Maybe 1.05. I think that's a little bit better. I still think I want the big buildings to have a little bit of a heavier footprint. So let's make this maybe 0.55 or 0.6. Okay. This is all subjective at this point, whatever you want. But it looks pretty good. Let's take a look in the layout mode. See what we got here. I think that looks all right. Now, I think there's a lot of big buildings covering a lot of the land. I think I want a little bit less of that. And to adjust that, I'm going to come back here to our big buildings noise texture and just ease back on the white a little bit, so we have a little bit more clustering of the big buildings. Maybe something like that. Might look pretty good. That's not bad. Maybe ease up a little bit on the height remapping. All right. Again, we can always come back to this later, but I think we're good. All right, we are done with this procedural part. And in the next video, we're gonna go ahead and start adding materials and shaders to make everything kind of really come to life. Again, all procedural. Okay, so when you're ready for that, I'll see you in the next video.